In the bustling alien city of Ziffer, technology and alien life mixed in a vibrant yet dangerous way. Neon lights flashed over crowded streets, where creatures of all shapes and sizes hurried about their business. Among these alien denizens, one human girl stood out, but not in a good way. Her name was Emily, and she was lost and alone. She had been sent to Zyphor as part of a diplomatic mission, but things had gone terribly wrong. Emily was now stranded in the lower districts of the city, far from the safety of her embassy. The towering alien skyscrapers seemed to watch her with cold indifference. Emily had been abandoned by her own team. The aliens had been hostile and unwelcoming, and when her team left, they did so quickly without a second glance at her. They had judged her as weak and unimportant, leaving her in a dangerous part of the city. The lower districts of Zyphor were a stark contrast to the upper levels. Here, the streets were dirty and filled with debris. Shadows lurked in every corner, and the air was thick with a mix of strange smells. The inhabitants of this area were rough and often aggressive. Emily's heart raced as she stumbled through the streets, her eyes darting from side to side. No one paid her any attention. Some aliens glanced at her with curiosity, but quickly turned away. They were too busy with their own lives to care about a helpless human girl. The few who did notice her seemed to find her predicament amusing, laughing and whispering among themselves. Emily's stomach growled with hunger. She had no food or water, and the little money she had was stolen in the chaos of her abandonment. Every step she took felt like a struggle against the oppressive environment. She tried to find help, but every time she approached someone, they either ignored her or sneered at her. Her clothes were dirty and torn from the rough treatment she had received. The city's harsh conditions had taken a toll on her. She was scared, and every shadow seemed to hide a new threat. The constant noise of the city, the blaring sirens, and the strange alien languages created a cacophony that added to her distress. As night fell, the dangers of the lower districts increased. The streets became darker, and the already hostile creatures grew more aggressive. Emily huddled in a small alleyway, trying to stay out of sight. She could hear the sounds of creatures fighting and arguing in the distance, and she shivered from both fear and cold. Despite her best efforts to stay hidden, a group of alien thugs spotted her. They were a rough-looking gang, their faces covered in scars and their eyes gleaming with malice. They approached her with threatening gestures, and Emily could only back away, her heart pounding in her chest. The thugs surrounded her, their voices harsh and mocking. They jeered at her and made it clear they saw her as nothing more than a plaything. Emily tried to defend herself, but her words were drowned out by their laughter and jeers. She felt utterly powerless. Just when things seemed like they could not get worse, a loud noise echoed through the alley. The thugs paused, looking towards the source of the sound. Emily took this chance to scramble away, her breath coming in short, terrified gasps. In the confusion, the thugs lost sight of her. Emily ran as fast as she could, her legs trembling with exhaustion. She didn't know where she was going, only that she needed to escape. The sounds of the thugs' angry shouts faded behind her, but the fear stayed with her. As she stumbled through the darkened streets, Emily's hope began to wane. The city seemed endless, and the danger felt ever present. She had no idea how she would survive the night, let alone find help. Little did she know, somewhere in the shadows, an alien with a reputation for strength and primal instincts was watching her. This alien, unlike the others, saw something valuable in Emily. But for now, all Emily could do was keep moving and hope for a miracle. In the darkest corners of Zyphor, where the city's advanced technology faded into primitive chaos, a different kind of alien roamed. His name was Drakkar, known among the outcasts as the primal alien. Drakkar was a creature of strength and instinct, with a reputation for surviving where others feared to tread. The night was particularly harsh in the lower districts. The streets were dimly lit, and the noise of distant alien creatures echoed through the alleys. Drakkar prowled through this wilderness with ease, his senses sharp and alert. He moved with a predatory grace, his eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of trouble. Drakkar had heard the commotion earlier. The thugs in the alley had been loud, and their taunts reached his ears. He wasn't interested in their petty games, but something about the desperation in the girl's voice had caught his attention. His curiosity had led him to investigate, but by the time he arrived, The girl was already on the run. He tracked her with ease. Drakkar was skilled in reading the signs of distress, broken branches, disturbed dust, and the faint scent of fear. The girl's trail was easy to follow, leading him through the winding alleys and dark corners of the city. Eventually, he found her. She was huddled in a small, abandoned building, shivering and clearly exhausted. Her clothes were torn and her face was streaked with dirt. She looked up with wide, frightened eyes as he entered, his imposing figure casting a large shadow. Drakkar approached her slowly, not wanting to startle her further. His movements were deliberate and careful, showing that he meant no harm. Despite his fearsome appearance, muscles rippling beneath his dark skin, fierce eyes glowing softly in the dim light, he had a calm presence. The girl's eyes darted between his face and the exit, ready to flee at the slightest sign of danger. Drakkar could see the terror in her eyes, and his own heart softened. He had seen many weak and frightened beings in his time, but something about this girl struck a chord in him. "Are you lost?" he asked, his voice deep and resonant. His words were spoken in a language she didn't understand, but his tone was gentle, almost soothing. The girl stared at him, confused and wary. She didn't respond, her body tense. Drakkar sighed and sat down a few feet away, giving her space. He reached into a bag slung over his shoulder and pulled out a small ration pack. He placed it on the ground between them, hoping to offer some comfort. The girl hesitated, her stomach growling loudly. The hunger was clear on her face, and Drakkar could see her internal struggle. Finally, she reached out and took the pack, her hands trembling. She opened it and took a small bite, her eyes never leaving Drakkar's face. Drakkar watched her eat, a mix of curiosity and concern in his eyes. He understood the girl's fear. He had been in situations where he was the one being hunted, the one left behind. His own survival had taught him the value of kindness and trust. As she ate, Drakkar made a decision. He knew the dangers of the city were too great for her to navigate alone, especially in her current state. He would help her, even if it meant defying the norms of his own kind. Drakkar stood up and motioned for her to follow. The girl looked up, confusion in her eyes. He extended a hand, and after a moment's hesitation, she took it. Drakkar's strong grip was reassuring, and she felt a glimmer of hope. They left the abandoned building together, and Drakkar led her through the winding alleys to a safer area. He kept a watchful eye on their surroundings, ready to protect her from any threats. The city's dangers were still present, but for the first time since her abandonment, Emily felt a sense of security. Drakkar knew that this was just the beginning. He had taken the first step in helping the girl, but the path ahead was uncertain. As they moved through the dark city, he vowed to keep her safe, no matter what challenges lay ahead. For Emily, the primal alien was more than just a savior. He was a beacon of hope in the midst of her despair, a reminder that even in the darkest corners of the universe, there could be unexpected kindness. Emily followed Drakkar through the dark, narrow streets of Zephyr, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and hope. The primal alien's strong grip on her hand was both reassuring and intimidating. As they moved, the noises of the city seemed to fade into the background, replaced by the sound of their footsteps echoing in the alleyways. Drakkar led her swiftly but carefully, navigating the winding paths with ease. His senses were finely tuned to the dangers lurking in the shadows. He moved with a confidence that Emily found both comforting and awe-inspiring. The alien's presence was commanding, and she couldn't help but feel a glimmer of safety for the first time since her abandonment. They passed through several dark alleys, the air growing colder and more oppressive. Emily could barely keep up with Drakkar's long strides, but she was determined to stay close. The ration pack he had given her was a small relief, but her hunger was still gnawing at her. Drakkar didn't hesitate. He stepped in front of Emily, his stance protective. The thugs spotted them and sneered, their leader stepping forward with a menacing grin. Well, look who we have here," the leader said, his voice dripping with malice. The human girl and her new friend. Drakkar's eyes narrowed. He didn't speak, but his body language was clear. He was ready to fight. The thugs advanced, their intentions obvious. Emily's heart raced as she watched the confrontation unfold. She had no idea how Drakkar would handle this, but she hoped with all her might that he could protect them. The first thug lunged at Drakkar, but the primal alien moved with lightning speed. He grabbed the thug's arm and twisted it, sending him crashing into a pile of debris. The other thugs hesitated, stunned by Drakkar's sudden and powerful attack. Drakkar took advantage of their surprise. He fought with a raw, primal energy, his movements fluid and powerful. Each strike was precise, disabling the thugs one by one. Emily watched in awe and fear, her eyes wide as Drakkar's strength was displayed in the dim light. The fight was intense but brief. Drakkar's skill and strength quickly overwhelmed the thugs. They fled, leaving the alleyway in chaos. Drakkar stood still for a moment, catching his breath. He looked at Emily, who was trembling but unharmed. "We have to keep moving," Drakkar said, his voice calm but urgent. Emily nodded, grateful for his protection but still shaken by the close call. They continued their escape, Drakkar leading the way with renewed focus. The alleyways seemed to stretch on endlessly, but Drakkar's confidence never wavered. He knew the city's hidden paths and led Emily through them, avoiding the more dangerous areas. After what felt like hours, they reached a secluded spot, a small, hidden courtyard surrounded by high walls. Drakkar led Emily inside and checked their surroundings. The courtyard was quiet, a temporary safe haven away from the dangers of the city. Emily sat down, exhausted but relieved. She looked up at Drakkar, who was still on alert, his eyes scanning the area for any signs of danger. "Thank you," she said, her voice trembling. "I don't know what I would have done without you." Drakkar nodded, his expression softening. "You're safe for now," he replied. "But we need to keep moving. This city is full of dangers, and we can't stay here for long." Emily took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. Drakkar's protection had given her a new sense of hope. She knew the journey ahead would be challenging, but with Drakkar by her side, she felt a renewed sense of determination. As they prepared to leave the courtyard and continue their escape, Emily couldn't help but feel a deep gratitude towards the primal alien. In the midst of the chaos and danger, he had been her savior, and she hoped that together they would find a way to survive the treacherous world of Zephyr. The small, hidden courtyard was a stark contrast to the chaotic streets of Zephyr. It was quiet and secluded, a rare oasis of calm in the midst of the city's chaos. Emily and Drakkar had taken refuge here, and for the first time in a long while, Emily felt a sense of safety. Drakkar's hideout was modest but functional. It was a small, makeshift shelter with a few basic supplies. Drakkar moved with practiced ease, preparing a small fire and laying out some food. The fire crackled softly, casting warm light on the walls of the courtyard. Emily sat on a makeshift bench, her tired eyes watching Drakkar's every move. The primal alien was a figure of strength and mystery. His earlier display of power had left her both in awe and curious. She couldn't help but wonder about his past and what had brought him to this hidden life. Drakkar glanced over at her, noting her weary expression. He gestured to the food he had set out. "Eat," he said simply. Emily hesitated for a moment, but then moved to the food. She was still hungry, and the sight of the simple meal made her stomach growl. As she ate, she couldn't help but feel a bit more at ease. Drakkar's presence was calming, and the food was a welcome relief. The meal was basic, but it was nutritious and filling. Emily ate slowly, savoring every bite. Drakkar watched her with a keen eye, making sure she was okay. Once she finished eating, Emily looked up at Drakkar. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything. I didn't think anyone would help me." Drakkar nodded, a faint smile touching his lips. "You needed help. It's as simple as that." His voice was deep and steady, filled with a quiet confidence. "You're not alone in this city. There are others like me, people who know what it's like to be in danger." Emily nodded, taking in his words. She had seen a side of Zephyr that was harsh and unforgiving, but Drakkar had shown her a different side, a side of protection and kindness. She realized that she had to trust him if she wanted to survive. As the night went on, the two began to talk. Emily learned that Drakkar was not just a survivor, but someone with a deep sense of honor and duty. He spoke of his past with a mix of pride and sadness, revealing that he had once been a warrior in a distant land. His skills and strength had earned him respect, but his journey had brought him to Zephyr, where he had chosen to live in the shadows. Emily shared her own story, explaining how she had ended up in Zephyr. She spoke of her diplomatic mission and the unexpected danger that had led to her abandonment. Drakkar listened attentively, his eyes reflecting a mixture of sympathy and understanding. As they talked, a bond began to form between them. Emily started to see Drakkar not just as a protector, but as a friend. His stories and his actions showed her that he was more than the fierce warrior he appeared to be. He had a sense of honor and a desire to help those in need. Drakkar, in turn, saw Emily's strength and resilience. Despite her fear and exhaustion, she had a spark of determination that impressed him. He admired her courage and her ability to face danger with grace. By the time the fire began to die down, both Emily and Drakkar felt a sense of mutual respect and trust. The dangers of Zephyr were still present, but for the first time since her ordeal began, Emily felt a glimmer of hope. With Drakkar by her side, she knew that she had a chance to overcome the challenges ahead. Drakkar stood up and stretched, preparing to move. "We should get some rest," he said. "Tomorrow we'll need to continue our journey. The city is full of dangers, and we need to be ready." Emily nodded, feeling a sense of relief. She knew that the road ahead would be difficult, but with Drakkar's help, she felt more prepared to face whatever came next. As she settled down for the night, she looked over at Drakkar, grateful for the trust they had built and hopeful for the future. The dawn broke over Zephyr, casting a dull light over the city's jagged skyline. Emily and Drakkar had spent the night in the hidden courtyard, their rest uneasy but necessary. The city outside remained as chaotic and dangerous as ever, but they had a plan. Today was the day they would attempt their escape from Zephyr. Drakkar had been preparing for this moment. He gathered his few belongings and checked his weapons, a series of blades and tools that were both practical and intimidating. Emily watched him, her nerves a bundle of raw tension. She had grown to trust Drakkar, but the upcoming challenge filled her with anxiety. "We need to get to the outer edge of the city," Drakkar said, his voice calm but firm. "The guards there are fewer, and we might find a way off-world." Emily nodded, her heart racing. She felt a mix of hope and fear. The outer edge of the city was known for its dangers, but it was also their best chance at escape. They left the courtyard and made their way through the labyrinthine alleys of Zephyr. The streets were bustling with alien creatures and their activities. Drakkar led the way with confidence, his eyes alert for any signs of trouble. Emily followed closely, her senses on edge. As they approached the outer edge of the city, the environment became more hostile. The buildings were in disrepair, and the air was thick with dust and decay. The path was treacherous, but Drakkar navigated it with ease, using his knowledge of the city's hidden routes. Suddenly, a familiar sound cut through the air, a roar of anger and frustration. Drakkar tensed, his grip on his weapons tightening. He looked at Emily, his eyes serious. "They've found us," he said. "Prepare yourself." From the shadows emerged the thugs they had encountered before, led by their ruthless leader. He was flanked by several heavily armed guards. Their faces were twisted in anger, and their weapons were ready. Drakkar stepped forward, his stance defensive. Emily could see the determination in his eyes. This was the showdown they had been dreading. The thugs had clearly been hunting them, and now they were ready for a final confrontation. The leader of the thugs sneered. "So you thought you could escape?" he said. "You should have known better." Drakkar didn't respond. Instead, he moved with lightning speed, attacking the nearest thug. The fight was fierce and chaotic. Drakkar's movements were precise and powerful, his skills evident as he took down his opponents one by one. Emily watched from the sidelines, her heart racing. The battle was intense, and the thugs fought back with equal ferocity. She could see the danger in Drakkar's eyes, the way he fought with a fierce protectiveness. Despite the chaos, Emily knew she needed to help. She searched around for anything she could use as a weapon or a shield. Her eyes fell on a nearby piece of metal debris. She picked it up, holding it tightly and preparing to assist Drakkar. The fight raged on, and Drakkar was starting to tire. The thugs were relentless, their attacks coming in waves. Emily saw her chance and rushed to Drakkar's side, using the metal debris to fend off an approaching thug. Drakkar glanced at her, a brief look of gratitude in his eyes. Together, they fought off the remaining thugs. The leader, realizing that his forces were being overwhelmed, retreated, disappearing into the shadows. With the immediate threat gone, Drakkar took a moment to catch his breath. He looked at Emily, his expression one of relief and exhaustion. "We did it!" he said, his voice tired but triumphant. "But we need to move quickly." Emily nodded, her body shaking from the adrenaline. She followed Drakkar as he led them towards the outer edge of the city. The path was still dangerous, but they were closer to their goal. As they reached the edge, they found an old, hidden spacecraft, a relic from a bygone era. Drakkar's eyes lit up as he recognized it. "This is our way out," he said. "Get on board. I'll handle the controls." Emily climbed aboard, her hopes soaring. The spacecraft was old but functional. Drakkar worked quickly, preparing it for launch. Emily watched, her heart full of gratitude and anticipation. As the spacecraft lifted off, leaving Ziffer behind, Emily looked out at the receding city. The danger was still present, but for the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of freedom. Drakkar had been her savior, and now, together, they were leaving the city's darkness behind. Drakkar joined her at the viewport, his eyes fixed on the stars ahead. "We've made it," he said, "but our journey is far from over. There's still much to be done." Emily nodded, feeling a deep sense of camaraderie with Drakkar. They had faced the danger together and survived. As they ventured into the unknown, she knew that their bond would be tested. But for now, they had achieved their escape, and that was a victory worth celebrating.